I want to say welcome to Chicago. I can say that now as I am just shy by 1 week of my first anniversary of installation. I cannot think of a better way to mark that occasion than by hosting your gathering here. It is also appropriate that this Justice for Immigrants conference is being held in the Windy City. For everything that defines the United States as a melting pot is here in our city's great diversity. Last spring, I addressed the City Club and noted that Chicago is a city of many languages, where people use different words. But when they use the word for home in whatever language, they all mean Chicago. Living downtown, I can walk to work from Holy Name Cathedral to the Quigley Pastoral Center and hear no fewer than a half a dozen languages. Mass in the Archdiocese is celebrated on weekends in 47 languages in addition to English. There is ample evidence that the diversity which immigration brings enriches our city, not to mention the country. From its earliest days, Chicago has drawn immigrants and refugees here because this is a city that readily gives the impression that it welcomes newcomers to call Chicago home, and that it honors people who take the risk of starting out fresh. Their aspirations have always been the same as all of ours: to find a better life, to care for their family, to leave behind poverty, violence, and oppression. I want to speak to you tonight about these persons on the move: migrants, refugees, victims of human trafficking, and others who seek security and opportunity. My purpose is not to tell you something new about them. You already know their stories and their challenges better than I do. Rather, I simply want to recall for you what is at stake, or better, why your advocacy and efforts on their behalf is singularly important to the Church, our world, and our nation. Pope Francis has been unrelenting in reminding us about what is at stake, and again most recently during his address to Congress this fall. He asked our elected officials to apply the Golden Rule in responding to those less fortunate, who ask us for help. In a word, he said, if we want security, let us give security. If we want life, let us give life. If we want opportunity, let us give opportunity. The yardstick by which we measure others is a yardstick by which time will measure us, unquote. My hope is that your gathering will be an occasion for you to rekindle the big-hearted impulses that prompted you to take up this work and to find fresh encouragement for what you do, particularly in hearing that the generous measure you are measuring to others will be measured back to you. So let's start with the present situation. It's a situation you know well. Simply put, as we look across the global landscape at the plight of migrant peoples, the signs of the times are very troubling. The United Nations reports that there are more displaced persons in the world than at any time since World War II. As many as 60 million people driven from their homes by wars and conflicts and the destitution they bring. And half of these 60 million are children. The Holy Father made the same point by noting that the humanitarian crisis in Europe today is larger than we faced during World War II, with hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees fleeing persecution and conflict. And closer to home, we see tens of thousands of unaccompanied children and families, young mothers with children, fleeing violence in Central America, attempting to find safety in neighboring countries and in the United States. Likewise, we have witnessed record deportations over the past several years, with thousands of families being torn apart, children separated from their parents, spouses from each other. Sadly, a broken political system means that our elected officials continue in their failure to fix a broken immigration system. Both dysfunctions harm us all. We cannot overlook the relationship between these two broken systems. Yes, these are challenging times for persons on the move, those in search of a better life for their children, or those merely attempting just to survive. All of this puts into perspective why your advocacy on their behalf is needed now more than ever. Let me spell out more precisely what your advocacy contributes to the lives of people on the move, but also to the public debate and the good of our church and the good of our nation. First, your advocacy brings hope. It gives hope to others. By standing with people on the move, you let them know that they are not making the journey alone. Your personal presence, but also the presence of the whole church, which you represent, is a light in the shadowy darkness that marks their lives. Your witness of solidarity is especially important for young people whose entire futures seem to be at constant risk. The present failure of our leaders to act on immigration reform has serious consequences for our youth as they live with the daily fear that their families could be torn apart by deportation. All of this undermines their confidence in the political process, which can only do harm to the nation as they mature into adults. Your voice for them, your presence to them, are critically important, lest they let their disappointment turn to cynicism about politics and government. Your advocacy reminds them that there are people who work each and every day to invest in their lives, knowing that you are the source of hope for so many, especially the young, is an installment on the promise of what will be measured back to you. Secondly, your advocacy keeps the topic of migration alive in the public square and provides the language and moral framework needed to clarify the issues and to respond to misinformation. Undoubtedly, the issues related to immigration and immigration reform are very complex. As pastoral leaders who work every day with families caught in a broken system, you understand that if we are to improve the situation, the only way forward is to give this discussion a moral framework. Yes, there are valid economic, security, and political concerns. But as you know, when we begin with valuing the lives of these people, a path opens for saner voices to prevail over the kind of fear-mongering that depicts immigrants and even refugees fleeing terrorism, considering them as a threat to us, a threat because they supposedly take jobs, or because they come from different religious backgrounds or ways of life. Framing our discussion of people on the move as a moral issue helps us encourage the general population to take a step back and see their humanity, view their plight in terms of human dignity and human rights. Moreover, let's be honest about something that's seldom reported. Our country benefits from the toil, the taxes, the purchasing power of a large number of undocumented workers, 8 million in all. Yet, we do not at the same time offer them the protection of law. The moral issue here is that we cannot have it both ways, exploiting and using them without honoring their God-given rights. As we talk to others about immigrants, we should appeal to the basic sense of fairness that is very much alive in the human spirit. A moral framework also provides us with the language to speak about the humanitarian challenges in our own backyard in a way that helps our citizens take a second look at the problem. Since the spring of 2014, we have witnessed thousands, close to 110,000 each of of unaccompanied children and families who flee to our southern border in search of protection from violence in the northern triangle of Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, countries with some of the highest murder rates in the world. As a response, our government has deployed a policy of deterrence to this migration, characterized by the detention of families in the United States and the U.S.-backed interdiction of children and families in southern Mexico and in parts of Central America. We have to replace this policy of deterrence with one of protection, both here in the United States and in the entire region. Your telling of the stories of the threats of life to life these children and the families face because of violence in their homeland is important to the public debate. Their stories give a sure footing for making the case that those interdicted must be provided a real chance for asylum, with children being assessed under a best interest of the child principle. All refugees should have a real opportunity to tell their stories to a judge, assisted by legal counsel, and should not be detained unnecessarily. Family detention, which further traumatizes women and children, has to be ended. The Church and her agencies, including Catholic Charities and the Catholic Legal Immigrant Network Incorporated, are ready to help and partner with the government to provide material support and legal aid. Instead of exporting enforcement resources, we must export development assistance, especially targeted at youth development and protection systems that give fleeing persons a chance at safe haven in the region. All of this has enormous consequences for our stature in the world. If we are unable to meet the humanitarian challenge in our own backyard, we will lose our stature as a humanitarian leader globally. The world will measure what we say about liberty and justice against our actions. So, as the Pope says, if we want liberty and justice, let us give liberty and justice. Another way that your advocacy contributes. Your advocacy puts a human face on the issue, and your voice is credible simply because you know these people. You not only make a moral case from principles about human dignity, but from your own personal experience, and that is a very powerful witness. The Holy Father has said it, realities are greater than ideas. The Holy Father has read the signs of the time. He has highlighted for the world our responsibility to care for persons on the move or escaping desperate situations. His very first trip outside of Rome in July 2013 was to Lampedusa Island in the Mediterranean. It was a symbolic first gesture to call attention to the deaths of migrants attempting to reach Europe by sea. But he also met with refugees. He wanted to be present to them. He wanted to know them. Out of that experience, he decried the globalization of indifference in the world to the plight of migrants and refugees, and to a throwaway culture that uses them and disposes of them. This is what he said: migrants are not pawns on the chessboard of humanity. He said these words for the 2014 World Day of Migration and Refugees. The Holy Father is calling Catholics today in Europe to personally become involved and receive refugees in their parishes. The heartbreaking picture of Aylan Kurdi lying lifeless on a Turkish beach riveted the world's attention. The Pope is asking people to reflect on the fact that this could be my child. We American Catholics have to do our part. It is true that the United States has led the world in providing financial support to Syria's refugees, which is necessary and appropriate. But we also have to point out that only about 2,000 refugees have been settled in the United States, out of about 4 million Syrian refugees globally. The United States Catholic bishops have urged our government to accept a larger number of vulnerable refugees from Syria beyond the 10,000 our government has announced that they will resettle this year. Here in Chicago and around the country, Catholic dioceses have received thousands of calls of support for Syrian refugees, many asking how they can help. Can I sponsor a family? Can I give help to refugees overseas? We are working with the ecumenical community, aid agencies, government, business, and labor to organize our efforts here. It's very heartening to know that Catholics and others of goodwill are not shunning these persons, but reaching out to help them. We also have to make sure that our voice, to be credible, we have to be also morally consistent. And that means speaking in solidarity on behalf of our Christian and Catholic brothers and sisters who are being persecuted in the Middle East and around the world. Such a consistent ethic of solidarity also means urging our government and other governments to offer them material assistance and safe haven, if needed, and protection in their home countries. In doing so, Christian communities in the Middle East will understand that they are not forgotten victims of this very terrible violence surrounding them. Our moral advocacy on behalf of migrant people has an enormous impact. Keep doing it. Our experience of knowing the real life situations of people on the move gives our voice credibility. Our church is taking the lead, as the Catholic Church in the United States is the largest private resettlement organization in the world. We should continue to embrace this proud record and build on it, and make the words of Pope Francis our own as we encourage our nation to act justly, reminding their fellow citizens that if we want security, let us give security. Your advocacy for the common good gives the nation also an example of solidarity in this time of deep political division. Last year, I addressed a group of leaders and made the point that comprehensive immigration reform is not just about the rights of individuals, but it's also about the good of families. Because it is about the good of families, it's also about the good of neighborhoods and the good of our cities. What we have seen over the last several years is families being split apart by deportations, thus weakening our nation's social fabric as it weakens immigrant communities. The Golden Rule says so much in this situation, or as the Holy Father put it, if we want opportunity, let us give opportunity. These words challenge all of us, the global community, our nation, each of us as individuals, to follow the Golden Rule. Yes, because it's the right thing to do, but also because it builds solidarity, the solidarity that we need in our nation. Practicing the Golden Rule spurs others to do as well. Likewise, when we don't follow the Golden Rule, should we be surprised when others treat us the same way? Finally, your advocacy is an act of patriotism and contributes to the good of the nation. Without question, the Church supports the rights of a sovereign nation to control its borders, to enforce its laws. But at the same time, we argue that all of this has to be done in a way that upholds human dignity and our American values. Your advocacy for immigrants keeps fresh the heritage that is part of our national American identity. In neglecting the immigrant, we begin to lose something of the very soul of our nation. When harsh rhetoric and warnings that some immigrants who come from certain religious backgrounds are a threat to our way of worship and our way of life, we need your voice of reason to remind us all that our nation was founded on the principle of religious liberty. when some press to criminalize millions of persons who have been here for years, who have built equities in this country, who worked hard, who pay taxes. Your voice on their behalf preserves not only their dignity, but our nation's heritage as a country, one of equal opportunity, one of fair play. When some want to deprive children of their parents' love, remove young men and women from the only country they have ever known, and tear the fabric of whole communities apart, your advocacy stirs the nation's conscience and memory of the self-evident truth that we are all equally endowed with the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so, let us never be afraid or hesitant to remind the American people that the United States is a generous land built by the hands of immigrants. At the White House, in his second formal address on American soil, Pope Francis appealed to our collective memory as a nation, even to the point of proudly identifying with our heritage. As the son of an immigrant family, he said, I am happy to be a guest in this country, which was largely built by such families. We have a similar pride in speaking to others about this heritage, a heritage of being identified with immigrants and their families who have made and continue to make this country great. For these and for so many more reasons, your advocacy and work on behalf of people on the move is of great value to those you serve, but also of great value to our nation, to our church. As the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops continues to push for comprehensive immigration reform and other laws that preserve the dignity of all people on the move, we respect the work that you do on the front lines each and every day. While our conference supports President Obama's executive order, we consider that step just a Band-Aid to the much larger problem yet to be solved. Likewise, the USCCB Committee on Migration has made clear the support of the bishops for the expansion of DACA and also the implementation of DAPA. These programs together would protect as many as 5 million persons from deportation, thus keeping families together. Hopefully, this matter will be reviewed now by the Supreme Court. There is every reason to accept an appeal of the recent ruling in Texas versus United States and ultimately permit their implementation. But we need a permanent fix by Congress. Trying to block the executive order and deport millions of people, including dreamers, brought to the United States as children and the parents of American citizens, is neither a serious proposal nor an adult way to deal with this issue. If the Congress disagrees with the President's actions with the executive order, then Congress should supersede them by passing comprehensive immigration reform. The majority of Americans want our Congress to act and pass comprehensive reform. It should not be held hostage to the views of a small but vocal minority. If we want opportunity, let us give opportunity. You who work each day advocating for people on the move should take heart in knowing that the United States Catholic bishops have been the strongest advocates of immigration reform. We have pressed for legislation that is tailored to bring persons out of the shadow, that puts them on a path to citizenship, that strengthens, not weakens, the family unity, and which ensures that migrant workers are able to migrate safely and work for just wages in humane conditions. I congratulate all of you who, despite some setbacks over the years, remain committed and steadfast for this goal. Tonight, I have talked to you about the people in the world who are on the move, but also about the importance of your advocacy. you are key to the efforts to move our world beyond the globalization of indifference of which the Holy Father spoke. You can count on the Catholic Church globally, the United States, and here in the Archdiocese of Chicago, to stand with you who are in the front lines, so that together we will urge the world to meet the humanitarian challenges consistent with Christ's call to us to welcome the stranger. In his message, the United States Bishop at St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington, D.C., the Holy Father made a special point of encouraging the Church in America to welcome immigrants. The Church in the United States knows, like few others, the hopes present in the hearts of these pilgrims, he said, and so offer them warmth, the warmth of the love of Christ, and you will unlock the mystery of their heart. I am certain that, as so often in the past, these people will enrich America and its church. In this statement, he was speaking not only to the bishops, but to all of you here in this room, as well as the untold numbers of other Catholics who perform acts big and small on behalf of vulnerable persons seeking safety, freedom, and a better life. As you have in the past, you will continue now to set an example that our nation and the world should follow, and of which all of you should be proud. So much is at stake in what you do. Be proud of that. Know that just as you advocate for those who are on the move, you are helping your homeland as well. Pope Francis spoke to the Congress about the responsibility we all have for building a nation that's just and welcoming, for which our country must continue to strive. Building a nation, he said, calls us to recognize that we must constantly relate to others, rejecting a mindset of hostility in order to adopt one of reciprocal subsidiarity in a constant effort to do our best. And then he concluded, I am confident we can do this. And so am I. Thank you.